Isolation is a damnable thing. Eyes dried from straining in candlelight peer down dark hallways of cold cement. Outside, howls rise over the ocean, unfiltered by civilization. There are no church steeples or apartment blocks to break the wind. Help is a ship away, and only comes after a telegram is sent, something you're not even sure you could do, even if your life depended on it. Peering through the slits on the secured bunker, cradling the rifle, you look out into the darkness. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust, stinging from the cold draft, but you make out a shape that should not be there. A soldier, like you, is standing on the concourse of Fort Mitchell, staring out towards the mainland. The wind howls stronger as you shout for him to get inside, that the storm is far too dangerous to brave and that he should return to his post. He does not hear you. A few seconds pass, your repeated attempts at warnings ignored, until finally he turns and you are face to face with the hollow, dead eyes of the Gaunt Gunner. Welcome back to the campfire. This week we'll be taking a look at Spike Island off the coast of County Cork. This prison predates the Republic of Ireland as a state, originally founded by the British Empire, but later taken back into the custody of the Irish Army after the War of Independence. Spike Island's prison was formed during the darkest hour of Irish history, the conquest of the villain Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell made a sport of invading Ireland in the August of 1694, burning cities and executing people for whatever reasons he deemed fit at the time. Soon after his conquest, there was the matter of prisoners of war. Many were entreated to death by the sword or firing squad, but the number of political prisoners accused of aiding the Irish Confederates was somewhere around 50,000. The decision for the Cromwellian regime was simple. To bury that many people, you would need a deep, deep hole. Cork City, home to the world's second largest natural harbour, was burned during Cromwell's conquest, razed to cinders. With the city being rebuilt under their control, the English crown eyed it up as a strategic location. A mere 14 miles from the city lay the town of Cove, a short boat ride from the coast of which lay Spike Island, a flat plain of an island, 103 acres big, and the prime target in the next phase of their colonisation. During this time period, Spike was used as a shipping depot for prisoners being ferried to other places, likely Montserrat or the Caribbean islands. The true fortification of Spike Island began amidst the American War of Independence. England's vigilance was that of a hawk as it battled the young eagle, and the Crown was concerned that Ireland would be their Achilles heel should America choose to move the war across the Atlantic. To prevent the now United States from breaking down the front door, Fort Westmoreland was built on Spike Island, constructed in a star shape. The idea behind this was to create overlapping lines of sight, allowing for multiple guns to be aimed at ships at any given time. Once the Irish took over the fort, it would be renamed Fort Mitchell, after the Irish nationalist John Mitchell, who was imprisoned in Spike Island in 1848. During the famine, itself a genocide perpetuated upon the Irish by the English Parliament of the time, you had not only somewhere around 1 million Irish people dying, but also an incredible amount of convicts due to the desperation of the Irish people at the time, many of which convicted for the crimes of stealing food. The normal areas for prisoner transportation, such as Australia, held quibbles over what type of convicts were being sent there. The embitterment of the convicts was notable, and this made them difficult to handle. The scars of persecution always hardened into spite. With the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the rationale for Spike Island's fort as a defensive mechanism was diminished, and so it was quickly repurposed into a prison. On the 9th of October 1847, 109 men were transferred to Fort Westmoreland for detainment. 3 years later, the full star-shaped fortress would be functionally completed, and prison architecture began to be retrofitted to several of its buildings. Men and boys as young as 12 were held within the walls of this secluded island at this point. It even had a special children's prison, holding up to 100 boys at a time in what was once an ammunition storehouse. One can only imagine the overcrowding of the prison at this time, as the English forces were effectively laying the track as the train was moving. The fly by the seat of your pants attitude led to a genuinely staggering death rate of the prison at 10%, with 1,000 men and boys dying in the first 6 years of its operation alone, many due to gross negligence. During this same period, up to 750 died specifically in the care of the prison's medical practitioner and surgeon, who was known to be drunk and hooked on opiates. Two mass graves mark the island's horrors at this point. As the threat of the famine receded, the prison would again lie dormant for several years, but in the early 20th century it would reopen to a large crowd of new inmates, Irish Republican soldiers and those accused of aiding them during the War of Independence. In 1921 alone, the island held 1,400 prisoners in internment. These prisoners were put to work there, but hardly treated fairly. One soul who was now known to be a potential ghost inhabiting the island is that of Captain Patrick White, a former carpenter who picked up a rifle for Ireland's freedom from colonialism during the war. He was interned at Spike on the 12th of April 1921, having been sent from Cork Main Jail. He had been an active participant in the fighting since 1914. When engaged in recreational time one day, he and some other inmates were playing hurling, Ireland's national sport, and the ball rolled outside of the area, past the wire marking the recreational area's edge. White reportedly asked the sentry if he could retrieve it, who obliged. When White reached under the wire, the sentry raised his rifle and fired, murdering White. Today, a plaque stands for him on Spike Island. While the captain is likely Spike's most well-known inmate victim of murder by guard, he is sure to be far from the only one. Today, it is said White can be seen in the prison, wandering halls he cannot leave, so close to the free land of Ireland that he fought for, but damned never to see it. Inmates, however, are not the only form of apparition which appear on the troubled island of Spike. For as long as the fort has had walls, there have been murmurs of another presence, a figure who keeps to ramparts and battlements, haunting lonely cold posts where soldiers once shivered through the longest and darkest of night. He is not a prisoner, but some sort of guard, a tall, hollow-cheeked, eyeless figure that appears in an old military coat, still pacing patrol areas or drifting through the casemates with the slow, deliberate tread of a weary man on duty. He does not speak or react when spoken to, and is seen walking what can only be assumed to be his old patrol, often disappearing into the dimness of corridors or around corners of the prison. By 1942, the Irish Army had taken control of Spike Island, converting the old War of Independence prison back into a military fortress. A lieutenant at the time was performing sentry duties during the night when he saw a person in an unusual uniform with an old military greatcoat walking the courtyard. Because it looked like the figure was holding a rifle, the sentry hailed him to identify himself. When no response returned, the Irish sentry leveled his rifle, aimed, and fired, but the figure seemed to vanish. Doubting himself, he kept quiet until a superior came by to inquire. The lieutenant explained himself, and his superior waited with him for the rest of the guard. During the night, the superior also reportedly witnessed the figure and fired upon it. There are other incidents of this figure without eyes, this Gaunt Gunner as he came to be known, being believed to be a living intruder and fired upon. When I heard this story, it reminded me of a remarkably similar story from American forces in Japan of the same era, so I made a call to my friend and University of Texas Rio Grande Valley history graduate, Manny Mejia.
So, I wanted to tell a story that was told to me by a good friend of mine when he served in the US military. When it comes to military, I have not served myself, but I've always ran in military circles my entire life, and soldiers enjoy a good tall tale. This is something that's consistent throughout every nation and every culture. Since going back to the Roman times, you've had people telling spooky stories while waiting for base shift to end. Our story today specifically will take us to the island of Okinawa, where in 1945, one of the bloodiest battles in human history occurred on a very small island. Specifically, an Air Force base that you can visit. Well, I wouldn't say visit since it's an Air Force base, but it's called Kaneda Air Base. To get into the specifics, Canada Air Base and most military bases for that matter usually have guard posts. They are controlled intersections that allow access into the base and out of the base. And what's peculiar about Canada Air Base is that one of the guardhouses, number three, is automated. You might be asking why they would automate a guard post. It's because the military tries to avoid tall tales. They usually cite morale reasons on why they didn't want people telling ghost stories, but that place has grown infamous for weird sightings. Okinawa is not a stranger to ghost stories. You can find plenty of tall tales, but this one has been a very popular one for many years and was encountered by my friend himself on a rainy night in Okinawa. When the battle began, the Marines were very surprised when they hit the beaches. By 1945, the U.S. Marine Corps had gotten used to very brutal fights against the Japanese when they initially hit the beaches and landings. When they hit the beaches at Okinawa on April 1st, they actually encountered absolutely no resistance. They used to joke that it was an April's Fool pranked by the Japanese. But what really happened is the Japanese commander had withdrawn the entire force into Okinawa's interior. Okinawa is a very rocky and jungly island, so it's very easy for the defender to dig in and really make the attacker work to get them out of their entrenchments. To make matters worse, Okinawa had been overstaffed because reinforcements bound for the Philippines had arrived there instead after the disastrous Battle of the Philippine Sea. So by the time the Americans had hit the first line of resistance, they didn't realize it, but they had just started what would be the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. Kadena Air Base back then was a part of that initial line of resistance from the Japanese. While it wouldn't be as bloody as some of the other battles on the island, like at Shuri Castle, nonetheless, many people died there, and this story is just one of the many stories that linger around that part of the island. It was a late night, and my buddy, for the lack of the story, we're going to call him John, was there posted by himself on guard duty. Now, guard duty in Okinawa is usually a quiet affair. It's a very rainy island, so the Marines will usually have ponchos and sit inside the guard houses, waiting for their relief to come in. On this particular night, John had been on his phone waiting for the end of his shift when he noticed movement at the edge of the jungle. Immediately, he put his phone down and went to alert. He was wondering if it was just another drunk Marine coming back from a night out at Okinawa. As the soldier approached, he noticed that he was very much covered in a poncho. Once again, it was the rainy season of Okinawa, so there was no reason to be alarmed. He simply waited for the soldiers to walk on, but as he got closer, he began to feel uneasy. He couldn't quite place it, but this soldier was off. There was no exchange, and he was a very quiet man. He wasn't making much noise as he moved toward the guard post. As he got closer and closer, that sense of unease grew within John. He told me when he was about 10 feet away, the soldier stopped, didn't really look up at him, but he uttered a single response. Do you have a light? So, reaching to his pocket to find if he had a lighter, he realized he didn't have one. And when he looked up to reply to the Marine that he didn't have one, he was gone. He immediately kind of went into a panic because he gotten so spooked. And when he went back to the barracks, he relayed to me, he finally realized what was so off about the Marine. By this point, this was 2015. The Marine that had walked up to him had been wearing combat fatigues that were used by U.S. Marines during the Battle of Okinawa. Now, I had mentioned at the start that there are many similarities with stories like this around the world. In Ireland, for example, the legends at Spike Island are a great segue when you talk about the spirit of a gunner who was supposedly a British officer that had died on the island. You'll never find a shortage of these stories in every single military circle. There's always a creepy place that has some kind of urban legend, whether it's meant to scare recruits or whether it's a true story based off of first-hand accounts. But what I always found interesting about military stories, especially once they get written up, is that the military is held to a very high standard. So whenever these things make into reports, like the spirit on Spike Island and the spirits of Okinawa, these are decisions that could potentially affect professional careers of soldiers, especially officers if they decide to write their own reports. It's why I've always taken military stories with a little bit more grain of salt because these are stories that are read by superior officers. And of course, if your superior officer does not believe in spirits, you're in a lot of trouble. Regardless, whenever these incidents were, especially if a firearm is discharged and it has to get written up, it's how we end up with these stories about ghosts wandering at night or spirits still manning their posts thousands or hundreds of years after the battles have ended.
The Gaunt Gunner is an enigmatic figure, anomalous in Ireland. We do not have a long history of military ghosts in this country. The identity of this soldier could be the likes of Captain White, or a British soldier who took his life on the island, as some speculate. It is not difficult to put oneself in the shoes of a soldier firing upon a ghost, especially in a uniform one does not recognize, during the year 1942. What is a lot harder to grapple with is the many sightings of the Gaunt Gunner, Spike Island's oldest sentry, across multiple decades. Thank you for joining me by the campfire again. Spike Island is a place of tumultuous history and frightening horror. Today, it stands as a destination for many dark tourists, with ferries running from Cove in County Cork. Perhaps we'll never know the full extent of the horrors which happened on Spike Island. Maybe that same terrible truth is exactly what the Gaunt Gunner is defending.